Yeah, I don't see anything on the YouTube.
Hmm. Hello all, good evening and thanks for joining Officers with Karan Desai. This is a very special meetup today which is happening from AWS User Group Bangalore because this format is something which we have never tried before, and thanks for joining the meetup, online meetup on a Friday evening. I'm sure a lot of people are kind of bored of attending meetups online, but hopefully we should get to an offline meetup more very soon. So I'm your host. My name is Jivan, and I'm the co-organizer of AWS User Group and also AWS Community Hero. Been running the user group Bangalore for AWS for the last 1 decade, more or less. Been started in the year 2011, early 2011. And today we have a very interesting folk with us. As you know, his name is Karan Desai, and I was privileged to meet him during 2019 reInvent at Las Vegas, and we had a great chat, great conversation for a couple of hours in a lobby in the hotel. And very recently, he moved to Mumbai. He was working at New York City as solutions architect at AWS, and very recently, he moved to Mumbai, his hometown, and started working at AWS India as a senior solutions architect. Um, Most of you who follow AWS and other things, his article on LinkedIn went viral about the experiences which he shared about what it takes to migrate or move from America, from the United States to India, and he shared his experiences about Aadhaar card, bank account, the UPI, and other things. So it's a very interesting blog to read. I will not take much time, and I will let Karan to take over. So as a disclaimer, this is office hours, so feel free to ask any question to Karan directly on slide.o. If you want to access slide.o, the link is accessible in the description below. You can go there and ask your question, and Karan will go through those questions and try to answer those questions. Uh, so welcome, Karan, and thanks for taking time to be part of AWS User Group Bangalore. I've been kind of looking forward to have you as a speaker for the user group meetup, and finally it happened. Uh, so over to you, and welcome to the user group Bangalore as well.
Hey Jeevan, thanks a lot for setting this up and giving me this opportunity to talk to people live, right? I mean, these are difficult times that we live in right now, and it's not easy to focus on work and used to, like about like user groups that you run. So yeah, I would definitely like to take this opportunity to connect with some of the people who have been very active in the AWS community here in India. And yeah, happy to answer questions that have come in. So we have a few questions that were already submitted by folks who wanted to attend this session in advance. So we will start with those first, and then we will look at more questions that come along the way while we are chatting. So, just a little bit of background about myself, which is also one of the questions that we got in advance, like what's the career path to become a solutions architect. So I started, I grew up in Mumbai. I started, my career in the United States. But before that, I did my studies in India. I went through engineering in Mumbai, went for my higher studies to the US. I did my master's degree in Virginia Tech. And from there on, I initially got into the tech world, into more of a support kind of a role, for network support role. And from there on, I moved on to a solutions architect role at at a company in the Bay Area in San Francisco, and eventually from there on I moved to AWS in my current role, which is a solutions architect. So I started my journey as a solutions architect in San Francisco in the United States for 2 years. After that, I moved to New York in the US for another 2 years, and now it's been 3 months that I moved to India, all in Mumbai. So, when it comes to taking a career path to solutions architect, one thing I would like to mention here is that at AWS, even within my current team and in my previous teams, the one thing that we have seen is there is a vast variety of what educational background people have before they become solutions architect. So it's not a requirement that you have to have a computer science degree, or you have to do electronics engineering or anything like that. Most people do come into a solutions architect role with some kind of a technical background, either in the form of a computer science or computer engineering degree, or some hands-on experience, working as consultants or cloud architects in other companies. Some people also come through very unconventional paths, like they might be in sales or they might be in finance, and from there on they have self-learned the AWS basics through the certifications, through the learning material that's available online. And from there on they've gotten themselves to a point where they were able to, like get into the solutions architect role. And we have welcomed all of those people with different perspectives. So irrespective of whatever your educational background is, I would say, if you want to become a solutions architect, what you really want to focus on is two things. One is your ability to see the big picture of what problem someone is trying to solve, right? The whole job of a solutions architect is to come up with solutions to specific business problems, right? So, everything that you build or a solution that you devise, that's all secondary. The first thing is being able to understand what is a challenge that someone is trying to solve. Can I visualize the big picture? Like, what is this going to look like in 1 year, 3 years down the line? What is the business implications? Why does a company want to do certain things? So when you see when you have that ability to see things into the long-term future, that's a great positive for becoming a solutions architect. The other part is the ability to devise solutions, right? Now, building solutions is like playing with Lego blocks, right? If you're familiar with AWS, there are over 200 different services. Now, that does not mean you need to know all 200 of those services like in detail, but at least having a high level idea to solve a certain kind of problem. What are the certain kind of solutions that are available? How do I mix and match those things together? And how do you build a solution out of those building blocks? If you have that logical thinking ability, that is what is more important than any formal degree that you have, or you don't have. So that would be my advice, that if you want to become a solutions architect, that rational logical thinking is more important than your background degree. And having some kind of a body of work that you can talk about, and display your ability to build things, that will go a long way. So, related to this, I also see a couple of other questions which talk about things like what would be your suggestion for a junior engineer who's aspiring to be a solutions architect in the future? So I will tell you one thing. When I joined as a solutions architect, I also joined in a very junior role, what we call an associate solutions architect. And from there on, I have grown over the last 5 years into a senior solutions architect position. So one thing I would say is that if you are a junior engineer or if you are just getting started in your career, that is not a problem. There are ways to get into solutions architect role right at the start or after a few years of experience in your career. Now, what I would say as a suggestion, my number one suggestion would be, work on a few projects where you take ownership of things. And what we like to call it, AWS and in many other companies, is following a star format, right? Which means we're talking about a situation, a task that's given to you, the actions that you took for it, and the results that you got out of it. Now, if you have worked on certain projects that you can describe, where you were given a certain situation, you figured out what actions you need to take, and you built a solution, and what was the result that came out of it. Now, this could be any projects, right? This could be a project in your university. This could be a freelancing project that you might take up with, someone you know. It might be a consulting assignment that you might have taken at some company. It could be a part of your previous job where you are as a junior engineer if you are working at some other tech company and you have been assigned a project to work on. Doesn't matter if the project is really big or it's really small. What really matters, when you want to get into a solutions architect role, is your ability to take ownership on things and come up with an end-to-end solution. So that is what I would definitely suggest focusing on, instead of trying to do all sorts of different. I want to get this degree or I want to get that certification. I mean, certifications are great in a way to enhance your knowledge, but just certifications will not get you there. What really gets you there is how do you use the knowledge that you gained as a part of gaining your certifications, right? Especially at AWS, we do a lot of hiring, and I do a lot of interviews, right, for people who join as solutions architects. And the thing that we want to really focus on and what we really emphasize during our interview process is for you to tell us what have you built, what was your role in it, and how did you excel in it. The idea is not to put you in a spot or to find your weak points and then try to drag you down on that. Instead, the idea towards the solutions architect hiring process is to understand how you think about things. What do you do when you are faced with a difficult situation? You may not always have answers to everything. Like I may not have answers to everything that we are going to discuss today, even after 5 years at AWS, right? But just the ability of how do you handle a difficult situation? Can you find something out of it that will help you move towards a solution if you don't have a solution? If you can display those kind of traits, that really helps to become a solutions architect. And also having a repository of some projects that you can talk about that you're proud of, right? This could be something that you built in your free time over a weekend. It could be something that you built as a part of your previous job. Like I built out a few things, like just tinkering with AWS services, like on my personal account in a weekend. Like I built an Alexa skill. I tried to build some small automation solutions. So having those kind of little things that you have built before, and this being able to demonstrate what you have done there, that is really useful. Right? And related to this, another question that we have is, as a beginner, what service should I learn first? So there is no easy answer to that, what service you should learn first, because if you know how AWS functions, it's building blocks of every different kind of solutions for every different kind of problem, right? There isn't one linear path that you start with service A, then you go to service B, then you go to service C. But if you want an answer with some names, typically I would say start with the most fundamental services, right? And what is absolutely important before you even start building your first project is understanding two things. How does security work? about whatever you are going to build, and how does identity and access control work for things that you will build. If you don't have these two things correct in advance, then whatever you build is going to have holes in it, and you might land in trouble. So contrary to what a lot of people think, that you should start learning about EC2 as the servers or RDS as the database, I would say even before you go to EC2, focus some time on learning about what is the AWS shared security model, how does security work in the cloud, what is identity and access management, how IAM works, right? IAM is probably the single most fundamental service on AWS that spans across everything else that you will build, and that is also what will control or give you nightmares if you don't configure it correctly. So I would say definitely spend a little bit of prerequisite time on understanding security models, understanding how identity access management works, then move on to your most fundamental services, right? We're talking about EC2 as your virtual machines in the cloud, right? As servers. We're talking about S3 as your storage. You're talking about VPC as your networking, and RDS as the databases, right? Now, again, this is a lot. If you want to, just get started with. So pick your choice, like, whatever interests you more out of these. Now, some people might start completely on a different note with analytics or machine learning or serverless kind of things. It completely depends on your interest areas. So there is no wrong way to go about it, as long as you are starting with the fundamentals and understanding a service or a set of services, in detail, what it does, why it exists the way it exists, like how do I interact with it, what kind of security holes I might end up with. Knowing those things before you go out there and start with your cloud formation template to start deploying your application, I think get foundations right is probably the most important thing that you can do. I'm also going to check if something comes in the YouTube chat, but otherwise I will keep going through the questions that we have here on Slido. Uh, okay, let's see. Okay, another question about life as a solutions architect, right? So the question here is, what is more important for becoming a solutions architect? Is it more professional experience? Is it cloud certifications? Is it less professional experience and more hands-on? Uh, this is a difficult question to answer because there is no single path to it. We have solutions architects who have come into AWS as SAs by focusing on all three of these things. We have some people who have a lot of industry experience with like 5 or 10 or 15 years of industry experience. They did not have any certifications. They did not build anything, as a hobby project or on GitHub or something. But they came with a lot of industry experience about, how architectures work and how solutions are built, and they make their way into a solutions architect. On the other end of the spectrum, there are people who are straight out of college, right? You don't need to have any professional experience if you are straight out of college. And in that case, how do you make up for not having that professional experience? That's by having projects that you build, right, on your own. So if you build something hands-on, and if you have a GitHub repo or a blog post or a Medium article, anything that you have written on your own where you have taken the initiative, right? It could be something very simple that, I'm going to write a blog post that explains, how do you create an S3 bucket. That's very simple. AWS has probably explained it 100 times. But if you can explain it in your words because you think that there is something missing in the official documentation and I can do better, or if you find a gap in a certain service and say, oh, you know what, I was looking at this RDS, and RDS cannot do this XYZ thing. So I'm going to build something that, on the sides on a weekend that, that can fix that small bug. Those things help as well. Cloud certifications definitely help, but I'll make this very clear that AWS does not look at the number of certifications you have as giving you some kind of a points that, okay, if I have a person with 4 certifications, we will get them to one level closer to becoming an SA. It's not like that. Instead, why that is important is when you study for a cloud certification, right? When you study for a solutions architect associate exam or a professional exam, you will learn some of the fundamental services, really well, and that will help you answer the questions in your interviews, and also it will help you be a successful solutions architect once you've joined AWS and you are in front of customers. So the knowledge that you gain by doing certifications, that is what is really important rather than the actual certification itself. So, for example, if you studied for AWS certification, but if you either don't have the time or the resources to spend the money on getting the actual certification exam, that's fine. Like learn the content, have that stuff in your mind, and if you can talk about it, that's fine. You don't have to go out there and spend $150 to get your certification, because that might improve your chances to get into AWS as a solutions architect. Uh, but the knowledge is what is more important, right? Uh, mm, Okay, let's see some more interesting questions here. So I have someone asking, I'm moving from an Azure solutions architect to AWS, new to AWS, I've done cloud practitioner, but no enterprise level experience. Where do I start for expertise? Now, one thing I would say is that while there is a lot of differences between what Azure offers and what AWS offers or what any other cloud provider offers in their solutions, the fundamental idea of how the cloud functions and the concepts of the cloud are still very similar. So the fact that you have an Azure experience, if you are able to translate that into equivalent AWS services, that would be a good starting point. Now, this is something that I did in the other direction. That after having 4 years of AWS experience, I studied for some of the Azure services and I did the Azure's Cloud Fundamentals certification to just get a sense of how things work between different cloud providers, right? And that's completely fine, right? There is nothing wrong in knowing about multiple cloud providers and see how the services compare. Now, once you know those fundamental services, how compute works on the cloud, how scaling works, how networking works, how shared security works, you already are partway there about knowing how AWS's fundamental things work. Now, what you want to understand to get into your expertise is, can you convert your Azure experience into equivalent AWS experience, and can you build something out of it, right? If you are able to, for example, spin up a basic web 3-tier web app, or a small serverless application or something based on your knowledge of the Azure things, but then using the equivalent AWS services, that would be a great starting point. uh, the other things that you can always do is get yourself more AWS experience in terms of either going through the certifications or picking up some freelancing projects and working on those. uh, but in general, I would say if you have one cloud experience, translating that into a different cloud is not going to be that difficult. It just requires a shift in just understanding some different services and some of the differentiators that a different cloud provider has. But the fundamentals still remain the same. Okay, right. Okay, so we still have a few more interesting questions coming here. Okay, so let's go to those. Okay, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to focus on some of the very high level questions first, and then we will go into more technical questions. There are a few questions about very specific AWS services, and I will get to them. I'm not ignoring them, but let's get the high level questions done first. So, two questions about the solutions architect role. We have a question that's asking, what does the solutions architect do? How much of it is hands on and how much of it is overlooking? So the answer to this is going to depend on what exactly do you call hands-on versus overlooking. If you talk about hands-on keyboard on a customer's production environment and making changes for the customers that we work with, as AWS solutions architects, we don't go that far. There is specific teams that do that. We have professional services that do it. There is a wide variety of AWS partners who do the hands-on keyboard building work. While AWS solutions architects are doing the consulting and reviewing and overlooking things. But that being said, the role of an AWS SA is not just overlooking. We are all builders in our own way. If you look at so many AWS blog posts, code samples, cloud formation templates, Lambda functions, all those things that are available on AWS sites in public, those are most of those things are actually been built by solutions architects as a part of our internal goals. So I have personally, for example, built solutions and written blog posts about it, which are 4 or 5 different blog posts that I've done so far. I have created some lab content, some workshop content. So there is a lot of hands-on work that you would do for creating reusable content that others can then use for their own use cases. And when it comes to actual customer facing work, For the most part, we are the technical advisors, where we will guide you through and review and make sure that you are using the right services in the right way. We are optimizing that for security, for cost, for performance. Uh, we might build some POCs for you, right, or some samples for you to show you how a certain solution is going to work when you actually deploy it on your accounts. So we do a lot of building. Typically, I would say at least 30% of my time definitely goes into building different kind of content. The other 50 to 60% of the time goes in being the advisors for our customers. And then some of the other time goes into actually learning new stuff and keeping ourselves up to speed with all the new innovations that AWS comes up with. So it's a combination of all three things. Okay. On this line, a similar question that we had here was, what is the most challenging solutions architecture design that you have done till now? Okay, this is a very interesting question. I'll have to think about it because I have probably worked with like over 100 customers on different projects that they have come up with, for the most challenge for different kinds of architecture. And you might think that the most challenging solutions architecture is something that is extremely complex and it has a lot of different moving parts and uses 20 different AWS services all tied in together. Uh, but I'm going to surprise you probably and say that the most challenging solutions architecture I actually worked on was for a really small customer who had built something out based on their understanding of what AWS is. And as a result of that, there were so many gaps in it in terms of everything from security to high availability to performance to reliability, that I had to basically rebuild that whole architecture, taking one step at a time out of it. And this is like trying to do open heart surgery on a patient while that patient is still alive, right? And trying to improve an existing architecture to bring it in line with AWS best practices while the production website is still running without downtime. I think those are the most challenging solutions architecture design that I have done. So in this one particular case, this solutions architect, the solution was designed by the customer where we started peeling the onions, like peeling the layer after layer to find things that are missing or can be improved upon. So this had all sorts of things that I would say are red flags in an architecture. So the customer was running production websites on a single EC2 server, which means you have a single point of failure. If that server goes down, your whole business is going to go down. Uh, it's using our RDS for a database, again, a single AZ, single instance for a database. It's running, the security groups for that were completely open to everything because someone just thought that the default 0000 is a good security group. It's not. So don't do that unless you really need it. Everything was built in public subnets, so there was no good level of security for between public and private subnets to divide things. Everyone had all IAM permissions, so your developers, testers, people who people who are in charge of QA, everyone had access to everything on their account. Big red flag. You don't want people to inadvertently break things. There was no security in terms of anything like a web application firewall or any monitoring like guard duty or security hub. So you can think about it that this is an architecture that is going to fail one way or the other sooner or later. And it did happen while I was working on it as well. So then what do you do with this kind of architectures, right? So then you have to start looking at it component by component and how do we improve the health of this architecture, right? So we had to do things like adding additional servers and auto scaling groups, on a live production site, so to make them more highly resilient. Doing a multi-availability zone RDS for the security, closing down their security groups one by one rule at a time, because you don't want to inadvertently block something that they are using for production traffic. So we did that part where you close one rule, monitor everything. Okay, nothing's broken. Let's close one more rule. Nothing's broken. Let's close one more rule. So it took a long time to do that. Then you go about IAM, right? When everyone has all access, it becomes a people problem to understand how many people really need access to that AWS environment and at to what level, right? So which means talking to everyone and understanding like what is their scope of responsibilities, and how do we create IAM policies that gives them the right level of access that they can do their job, but not unnecessarily large levels of access that they can inadvertently or knowingly cause damage to the site. So that took a lot of time to give everyone different IAM credentials with customized IAM roles. Then you go about adding security on top of it. Now, when you add WAF on top of an existing production website, you have to be extremely careful that you don't start getting false positives, which might start blocking legitimate traffic from coming onto your website. So you have to be very carefully, one by one, add WAF rules, see what kind of traffic it is stopping, make sure that the website performance is not degrading or the accessibility is not degrading. Okay, let's go to next step. Let's go to next step. So that takes a very long time. And then when you do all of these things, what happens invariably is that your AWS bill will shoot up because now you've added a whole bunch of new services. And everyone has budget constraints, right? No one works with an infinite budget in a real world. So now comes the difficult part of how do we get cost optimization done on this thing, so we bring it back into the customer's budget while also not breaking or taking away features that we just introduced into the environment. So now it means monitoring your CloudWatch metrics for a period of time to see if we can change your EC2 instances to different instance types, which servers can go into a savings plan or a reserved instances, which have to stay on demand. What do we do with all the backups and snapshots we have taken? What happens to all the data in S3? Can we move some of that stuff into Glacier? What happens to their networking? Are they doing a lot of data transfer between availability zones? Can we reduce some of that stuff? So that part is what took a large amount of time after that eventually. And the end result was that after adding all of these services, the bill went up. Then we worked on getting it optimized back down. And eventually they were back to spending the same amount of money that they were spending earlier 2 months ago on a relatively very unoptimized and insecure setup, versus now they have a lot more things working on their account for better security, monitoring, and visibility while still staying at the same cost. So this is probably one of the most challenging architectures that I have worked on. Okay, so more questions are coming in here. Some are also coming on YouTube. So let me see on both here what's happening. Okay. All right. Okay, so we have a question here from Ashutosh. He's asking about what are the non-technical skills you think every solutions architect must have? So one thing that is extremely important as a solutions architect is your ability to talk to people of different job levels, different technical skills, different levels where they are in an organization, being able to understand and see things from their perspective, priorities, and understand what is important to them, and then translate it into what solutions are going to work for them. That comes later, right? The technical skills comes later when you actually start building the solution. But before you go into it, I would say 50% of my time on any given week is me just talking to people. So the ability to be able to clearly convey the ideas that you have in mind, and the ability to listen and understand what people are saying, understand the nuances inside it, understand what kind of challenge or issues or problems people are facing, and being able to understand from their perspective, like what matters to them the most, why are they coming to me, what is troubling them right now, right? Being able to have those conversations and be able to clearly understand people's needs, and being able to convey your solutions to them clearly, that is definitely important. The other thing I would say is really important is your ability to multitask. Because in any particular week, I would say that at any given time, I am typically working with 5 or 10 different customer projects with different customers, which can be completely different from each other, while also working on certain internal initiatives, doing this kind of webinars and talks where I'm talking to people, presenting stuff, creating the content that goes into this kind of things, and being able to do that context switching. Like, how do you go from talking about optimizing Lambda functions to creating a cost estimate for RDS, and then 2 hours later switching into creating a presentation about hosting a website? how do you move between different kind of tasks, right? Being able to compartmentalize what you are doing, and being able to switch from one to the other, that is something that is really important for this role. And I'll tell you one thing, if this feels like a lot, that, oh, I don't have this kind of skills, so I will never be a good solutions architect, here is a secret. None of us came with these skills from day one. This is something that you learn over time as a solutions architect over a period of time. All of us solutions architects, including myself and anyone else you talk to AWS, we have all had our moments where we fumbled about things, we forgot very basic things. There was a time 2 weeks ago when I forgot what is the full form of EC2. Uh, Something that you might think that you should know on the first day in AWS, but it happens, right? Sometimes you forget things and then you go back and learn those things. There have been times when I have started a conversation with someone and 5 minutes into it realized that what I had in mind was for someone completely different, and I'm talking to a whole different customer about this thing, and I need to stop and start again. So we are all humans, mistakes happen, everyone understands that. As long as you learn from it and realize how you can make it better next time, it's all fine. I have not faced any troubles because of that. People understand that everyone's busy and sometimes you miss out on things. Sometimes I go completely blank during a meeting and I don't know the answer to things. In that case, the ability to just take a step back, tell them honestly that, okay, I don't have an answer for you right now. I'm going to take this, do some research, and come back to you with an answer. That's completely fine. You don't have to know everything right off the bat when you go to talk to someone. Right? Okay, I think that was a very long answer for this question, and I see more questions are coming in. All right. So a question that just came in is, what are the questions that you would ask to the stakeholders that you could bring about the solution for the client problems, right? So this is going to vary from a situation to situation, but in a very typical scenario where a customer has said, I want to talk to an AWS solutions architect, and I go in there for the first meeting and want to just have that conversation. The first question that I always ask is, what are your challenges? What are your problems? Or what is it that is bugging or troubling you for which you are currently looking for a solution, right? So this is where the conversation always starts, right? Because this is the AWS philosophy, and in general, right, if you are a solutions architect, your job is to present a solution that solves a particular business challenge, right? Your job is not to just go in there and give them a solution because you thought it's a cool solution, right? We are out here to solve specific business problems. So my first question is always about, what is the business challenge or problem that you are currently facing that you're trying to solve. The second thing I ask always is, what is your current technology stack or your level of understanding or comfort level with, right? Because the solution that we propose is going to differ based on, what kind of a shop you are. If you are a Windows shop, if all your developers are working on .NET and SQL Server, for example, if I go in and say, for the problem you're trying to solve, I am going to recommend that you start writing Lambda functions in Node.js. That might be the easiest solution to go, but that requires a learning path, right, for the customer, that they might have to completely turn around their ways of working and learn a whole new technology. Does that make sense for them? Maybe it does not, right? So understanding what a customer is currently familiar with and currently comfortable with going into the future, that is another question that I always ask. Uh, the third thing that I always like to ask is, what is most critical to you, and where are the things where you're willing to make some compromises, right? Because building any solution is, at the end of the day, about building something that achieves the end goal within the constraints that you have. Like, no one has infinite funds and infinite time to build a solution, right? So you can never build a completely ideal solution. There is always going to certain things that are must haves and certain things that are nice to have. The must haves have to be there in the solution. The nice to have things are the ones on which you can compromise. So for example, if you are working with a customer who is running a stock trading platform, for them something like latency is an absolute must have, because that extra 5 milliseconds of latency might be the difference between you getting that trade or your competitor making that trade. uh, on the other hand, if you are running some kind of a site which is running an e-commerce website, or like a large scale high performance computing clusters, if that is going to be a part of your solution, maybe the main concern for them is the availability of compute capacity at an appropriate rate, even if that means that you are using data centers or regions which are far away from them, or using a different solution, for example using an RDS instead of a DynamoDB. So in that case, you are compromising on latency for getting the right price or the right performance that you want, or the other way around. So there is always this thing that you need to understand what are the constraints with which you are going to be building, right? Because there are always going to be constraints. If I talk to you and you say as a customer that I have no constraints, like go wild and build a solution, I would find that very difficult. That do you really have no constraints? Everyone has some constraints that eventually come up like in later conversations. So that is something that's extremely important to know. The earlier you know it, the better it is that you will be able to build the right kind of solutions for them. Okay. So another question that we have here is, have you faced any production level critical issues in architecture, and how did you resolve it? So one thing I would say here is that at AWS we have a delineation of the functionality and the roles that we have. So when a customer faces a production level critical issue, the ones who are best suited to answer those things are our cloud support engineer teams, right? So when they have the professional support, when they have our cloud support engineers available, they have the tools, they have the ability to monitor your logs and infrastructure and log into your account, make changes, immediately make recommendations. So we leave that for the experts because that is what they are experts in. However, what happens is when there is a production level critical issue, invariably the customer is going to ask the solutions architect to join in and be a part of that conversation. So yes, I will be a part of those conversations that we have a production level issue that's going on. Support is the one who is helping them resolve that because they have all the right tools available, they have the right right access available, and my job at that point is going to be the mediator between the customer and our support teams. That I might have prior context into that customer's environment. I might know why certain things are built the way they have been built. So being able to convey those things to support, that if they come up with, for example, and saying that, oh, there is a problem because all of your EC2s are in this public subnet and somebody tried to access it, and I might have a reasoning, there might have been a prior context that I can go and tell them that, okay, you know what, this is the ABC requirement that this customer had, that is why there's things are in private public subnet. So let's not recommend them to move into private subnet. Instead, we will recommend a different solution to secure this environment and thwart this attack. But there is a certain reason to why certain things exist the way they do based on prior context. So that is what I often get involved in. I had very recently, I had a production level critical issue where a customer lost access to some level of production data that brought their sites down because that part of that data was extremely important for rendering their website, and this was causing them. This is an Indian customer, and this was causing them tens of thousands of rupees of production business loss for every minute of downtime. So obviously the first step to do at that point is to engage support, because they are the ones who are going to be able to log into, look at the logs, look at the tools, try to find out what options we have. Can we restore this data? Can we get something from backups? Can we do something on the back end? My role in the time was basically to be on the call the entire time and understand what is going on, what are the options that are going to work, what is not going to work. If the support engineers recommend certain changes that need to be made, validate them on the spot quickly. That okay, if they are saying that you need to recreate this new AMI or recreate something out of this particular snapshot, just make sure that I understand and be able to explain to the customer that, hey, this is what you needed to do, this is how you go about it, and this is why we need to do it, right? The support engineers are, for them, time is of the critical importance, right? So they will quickly tell you what you need to do. A lot of times customers want to take a pause and ask a solutions architect, why are we doing this, right? What does this mean for our business? So being able to be present there and provide that additional context, while they make changes to the critical infrastructure, that is what I've done as solutions architect multiple times. Be on call and be able to provide the additional context about why they are doing certain things. Okay, let's see what more we've got here. All right, so this is done. This is done. This is done. Um, Okay, all right. Going into some of the more technical questions here, right? So there is a question that someone's asking: when it comes to databases like MySQL, when will you prefer to have an RDS MySQL, and when will you prefer to have Aurora MySQL? Right. So the first thing to understand here is that Aurora and RDS are both managed services of standard MySQL, right? Whether you use Aurora or whether you use RDS or whether you run your own MySQL, the technology does not change for you as an end user. It's all going to be the same. So then the question comes down to what are the features of Aurora? Why did AWS even come up with Aurora, right? What are the things that we are providing here over RDS? RDS, yes, it makes sense that it goes through that core cloud philosophy that all undifferentiated heavy lifting should be taken by AWS while you handle the actual business logic on it. So RDS gives you that thing, right, where the underlying hosts are managed, and if something goes wrong, the hardware failure will be handled. But at the end of the day, your RDS MySQL is still very much like a self-hosted MySQL in terms of its high availability, in terms of its performance, in terms of its resiliency. It's a server at the end of the day, right? A managed server. Aurora, on the other hand, adds additional features on top of it, right? For example, one of the big difference that Aurora brings in is it basically decouples your compute and storage, right? When you have a database, there is two parts to your databases, right? That there is the compute power which requires for doing your database queries, and on the other side you have your storage where you're actually holding your tables. So by doing the delineation, it gives you higher performance at lower sizes of instances, because now your instance is only doing compute, it is not doing any storage related operations. The storage has been completely isolated aside. The storage uses an underlying highly available platform that spreads across three availability zones. So now you are getting inbuilt high availability without you having to set up like a continuous replication or a primary secondary master slave kind of setup. You don't have to do all of that. Aurora does it behind the scenes. If something goes wrong in one availability zone, it will quickly flip over to another and make it primary. All of that is handled behind the scenes. There is also things like Aurora also has a serverless option. So you don't have, if you go that far into Aurora world, then you don't even have to guess how much capacity you need, right? Already with Aurora on the storage side, you are not pre-reserving capacity, right? With RDS, you have to say that, okay, on my RDS MySQL, I'm going to add a 200 GB disk because my database is going to be 200 GB. On Aurora, you basically just start loading your database tables. You don't know if your database is going to be 20 GB or 200 GB. As your database grows, you will pay for what it grows, and it will keep growing, right, to an infinite level up to 64 TB, which is a lot of data. So having that level of I would say management or like automation to a certain level where you are not worrying about these things and let AWS worry about those things is where Aurora really shines. You can also add your additional read replicas, much easier. Your performance is more consistent because Aurora has been built for AWS. So all of these are the good things. Now, on the other hand, you might find that going for all of this might not be in your budget, or you might want more hands-on control over your databases. So if that is the case, then you should go with RDS MySQL, right? Because that gives you more access over your databases. How do you want to, what size you want to keep them? Like when do you want to upgrade them? When do you want to turn them on and off? So it eventually boils down to one simple thing, like, do you want AWS to do as much as possible and you only want to run your databases, or are you the kind of person who likes to be in control and want to do more things on your own, right? Okay, so since we have a lot of questions coming and we are at 47 minutes right now, I want to make sure we at least touch upon all of those questions at a quick level. So, okay, which one do we go to next here? Let's see on the YouTube live comments, right? We have questions coming here. So
So I
I'll
have
go.
posted on the this thing on the screen. How much of an overlap does solutions architect have with the technical account manager?
Hmm, okay, wait a minute. Now all the questions are all over the place at this point. So let me just go through the most recent ones, right? Let's start that way. Okay, how much does the solutions architect have over a technical account manager, right? So in terms of AWS terminology, right? Solutions architects are for all customers. Technical account managers are assigned to customers who are at a certain level of billing with AWS, right? Typically, the cost it starts at around $15,000 a month, which means you're talking about large enterprises. Which means also that a technical account manager's role is also to be more of a person who understands things at a large enterprise level, who can handle things on large complex organizations where you might have different departments working on different projects, like there is a lot of coordination required between them. You're talking about large enterprises, right? On the other hand, a solutions architect can be for anyone from somebody having one server to somebody running hundreds and thousands of resources. So what I have found from the technical account managers that I work with them is that typically they tend to be a little more strategic and a little less hands-on on a technical side. So you will find that a solutions architect will be like, happily building out things like, building POCs and building solutions and coming up with cloud formation templates for you and like doing a lot of building work. A technical account manager, by the name, they are also technical, but their most important job is to be basically your white glove treatment, single point of contact for a large enterprise, like to be able to navigate through the vast environment of AWS and get them the right resources at the right time with the right priority. So their job is, I would say, the manager part in a technical account manager is bears quite a weight there. There are TAMs which are very practical, who are very technical. They will also write blog posts and they will create solutions as well. But on a day-to-day basis, you will find typically a technical account manager's role is more about making sure the customer is getting what they need, being a liaison between the customer and AWS and different teams, and handling all of that stuff, keeping them upfront with all the priorities and new things that AWS comes up with. So basically being that customer's single point of everything that they might need from AWS, right? Uh, and obviously they are more aligned on a one-to-one basis on a strategic. They know the customers like teams in and out. They know the customers large scale strategies, what projects they have in mind in the pipeline for a year or two, versus the solutions architects tend to be a lot more agile in terms of how often we engage with customers and like what kind of solutions we can provide them. So I would say that's basically the large difference that comes, in terms of the two roles here. But there's definitely, I would say, maybe a 30 to 50% overlap in what a solutions architect does versus what a TAM does in their day-to-day life. Okay. All right. What else do we have here? Let's see. Um, So I have a question here. It says that what motivates you to keep learning new services and features that AWS keeps adding, and how do you keep up with it? So I would say the motivation comes invariably from the customers. Typically, when AWS hosts reInvent, our yearly conference where a lot of new features are released at once, and every year I've been to 4 reInvents so far, and what happens is the moment Andy Jassy announces a new service, within 30 minutes, you will have a customer reach out to me saying that, Karan, I just learned that AWS launched like this new service called ABC. I want to use it. What does it exactly do? Please explain it to me. And when the customers are moving that fast, you have no choice but to basically keep up with them and learn things and keep going and keep learning all the new technologies that come with it. Because our customers are really fast, and when they are fast, you have to be fast. There is no other option, right? And that is what makes things really interesting as well, that you never get bored about it, that, oh, you know what, I know everything that AWS has, what else am I doing in my job right now? It keeps things very interesting. I've been 5 years into this job now, and I still feel that every single day I find new things or new services or new features that I did not know about, and it gets me really excited that, oh, something new, let me start learning this. What does this do? uh, how do you keep up with it? That is a very difficult question to answer. Honestly, it's hard to keep up with everything. There is a few different ways. The what's new with AWS feed is definitely a place to go to, like, browse through and just glance at things that were released, and whatever catches your interest, maybe like read a little bit about it. Uh, There is some third-party newsletters. Last week in AWS is a very popular one that a lot of people, even including AWS people, use it to keep up to date with things that are happening and new features that get released. Then there is things like this user group, right? Sometimes you will find that even before an AWS employee knows about some features, you will have people on user groups like already building things with it and creating solutions and sharing with people. So I would say the community is so vast and so well knowledgeable in terms of AWS knowledge and their own excitement, that keeping an eye out on what non AWS people are doing is also another way of keeping up with all the new things that AWS comes up with. Okay, so let's see what else is here. So somebody is asking here, Lambda versus functions as a service on Kubernetes. Which one do you prefer for hosting functions, and explain the advantages? Okay, so you are making me take sides, right? In that giant battle of serverless versus containers. Like people, this seems to be a very heated topic where certain people love the idea of being on containers and certain people love being on functions. There is no real single answer to this, like, which one do you prefer? It comes down to two things, right? One is what is your comfort level about both of those technologies, and the second is like what is the rest of your infrastructure look like? What is going to result in the best integration of what you're trying to do? Now let's say if you are running a team that is very comfortable with Kubernetes and you are already running Kubernetes for the rest of your architecture, using functions on Kubernetes might be the right direction for you to go because that is something you are already doing. On the other hand, if you are just entering as your first step into the world of serverless, the easiest way to get into serverless is to use Lambda, because Lambda does most of the things with you. You literally take your code, put it into Lambda function, click a couple of things about creating your triggers and creating your outputs, and you're done. Within an hour, you will have your first function up and running in production. So, in that case, and if that works for your case, I mean, great, you should stay on Lambda at that point. If you start realizing that there are certain constraints of Lambda that are not working for you in terms of whether it is execution time, the maximum timeouts, or it is the size of the functions, or the language that you want to use is being too complicated on Lambda or not supported, at that point, then you start looking at other options that, okay, can I do functions on Kubernetes? Maybe that's a better option for me to go. But yeah, in the end, it's all going to boil down to like, what are you trying to get to and what you are comfortable with. Right? Uh, okay, let's see. We can probably still squeeze in a couple more questions here. I'm glad that people came up with so many questions here. What is the most challenging task while migrating from on-premises to cloud? Okay, so this is something that I deal with on a weekly basis, right? And I would say there are two most important things that go in while moving from on-premises to cloud. The first thing is understanding what are your problems or red flags or challenges on premises, and making sure you don't migrate your problems onto the cloud when you migrate your infrastructure, right? So people usually think that, okay, you know what, I'm going to move from on premises to cloud, so whatever was my architecture on premises, I had 5 servers, they had 4 vCPUs, they had 8 GB of RAM. I'm going to find the equivalent thing on AWS, I'm going to build it exactly the way it is, and now I'm on the cloud. And I would say by doing this, when you do a straight lift and shift from on premises to the cloud, the same challenges or the problems that you had on premises, why you decided to move to the cloud, you have also taken all of those along with you. So making sure you don't do that and understand where your problem areas are, and making sure that those don't come ahead, they don't tag along when you migrate, is the first thing. And the second thing is, invariably, it's not about technology, it's about people. You'll find that when you start an on-premise migration to the cloud, within your organization, you will find the people typically fall under 3 categories. There will always be one group who is extremely excited about moving to the cloud because they like the idea that they can now, take advantage of a lot of services and all the flexibility and everything that comes with it. So they are your champions. They will gladly say, okay, you know what, let's start our migration right now. Then there are second group of people who are the indifferent ones. They will be like, you know what, everything's working fine. Why do we need to do all of this? I mean, let's just keep running the way things are, right? I mean, we'll stay here. I mean, what's the big deal about cloud? and trying to convince them, like, why they need to agree to move to the cloud and like take their workloads onto the cloud, takes a bit of work. And then you will find other detractors, the ones who are extremely happy about the way they have built certain things, right? For example, if you build something from scratch on premises 20 years ago and you're running on it, you get really attached to those things and you don't want to go into changing something that changes the fundamental way things work. And in that case, you will find a lot of hesitation which will pull down your entire cloud migration project because they would not want to move out to the cloud. So how do you handle these expectations of the excited group, the indifferent group, and the detractors group? That ends up being a lot bigger challenge than the actual technical migration more often than not. We have 2 minutes, I think, so I think we can still take one or two questions here. Let me see what else we can take here. Uh, let's see from the YouTube part. Yeah, all right. Let's see from this one on Slido. Also, we had a lot of things here. Um,
So I have posted a question on the screen. NoSQL DynamoDB versus RDS Aurora. When to choose what? Right DB for the
okay.
right use
All right. Let's
cases.
do that one, right? So this question comes on offer. Right? When do you use NoSQL versus SQL or RDS versus Dynamo? So the first thing to understand here is that AWS offers a variety of different databases for different use cases, right? What we like to call the database freedom. That you get to choose different kinds of tools for different use case. Now, at a fundamental level, understanding what is the difference between RDO and RDS and Dynamo, right? RDS is your traditional SQL database, SQL-based database or relational database, right? So when you're talking about your usage patterns or the way you do your database tables, if you're going to have a lot of complex tables with like joins between multiple tables, you're trying to run some very complicated queries on them. Uh, these are the kind of things that are well suited towards a relational database model that SQL has perfected over the years. So in that case, you would typically gravitate towards RDS Aurora now, because at the end of the day, both are SQL server, SQL based technologies. NoSQL or DynamoDB really shines when you are looking for very very fast responses to your simple key value type tables. So you're talking about like keeping a score for games, like keeping high scores for games, stock prices. If you're talking about like multiple people are participating in some kind of a challenge and you want to monitor their progress, a social media post, like you have a live feed of a lot of things that are coming quickly. So for those kind of things where your tables are relatively simple in terms of the number of items they have, and what you're looking for is extreme fast speed of access to things, right? That is where NoSQL databases shine really well over your SQL-based databases, and you should definitely start with DynamoDB or NoSQL for those kind of environments. Uh, and then see if that works for you. If not, then if your environment becomes too complicated, or if you start doing like if you start requiring joins between tables and like all of those kind of things, then you start doing it with a combination of NoSQL and SQL. But a quick thing is like, do I have key value kind of very fast query patterns kind of thing, or do I have complex database tables, right? And that lets you pick one or the other for the use cases. I think we are at a full hour here, so I'll take a pause here and let's check. How do we want to go about with this? All right, so I think I covered pretty much all the questions that we had. Jeevan,
Yeah,
do you want to wrap things up after this? We are at a full hour at this point.
yeah. I think let's wrap it. Probably we will get you and also somebody else from AWS for a very different topic, which I have been thinking for quite some time. Probably 2 3 months down the line. So hopefully we will have great number of audience for that topic. So thank you so much, Karan, for taking time. I know you are busy and you have a lot of things to do, but thank you so much for taking time over a week on Friday evening to address AWS user group Bangalore as well as India members. Thank you so much. So we will come back again with during next month sometime to host another meetup as usual. Thank you so much for watching this online. And please spread the news about AWS user group, Bangalore, India, and there are more than 18 cities which are operating today and running user groups. So get your friends and family members. Let's spread the knowledge and let's stay connected and stay safe and take care. Thank you, Karan. Thank you all. Take care.
Okay, thank you everyone. Just want to say, it's difficult time right now. So, and everyone's suffering from fatigue of a lot of online events. But I'm extremely thankful and glad that so many of you came in here. You had your questions. I hope I was able to answer at least some of them to certain extent. And, please stay safe and definitely reach out to the user groups, reach out to us and, keep building.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you all. Have a great weekend ahead.
All right, see you.
Bye.